enjoy. If you guys remember kind of how we went through this last year, that there are some green boxes that go down the left-hand side of the page. If you have the hard packet in front of you, those green boxes kind of serve as our agenda. So once I get off of this slide, I'll toggle back and forth to it. But if you're wanting to look back at the numbers, those green boxes are really going to kind of be the roadmap. And the PowerPoint is going to be more of the granular information as we unpack these numbers. But if you guys remember last year, the process for us is that we give these numbers, before we give them to you, we give them to corporate. Mike Scanlon and Ken Wajda up there, they love to play devil's advocate and poke holes at them and ask questions. And so one of the things I like to do is kind of share with you strategy and their thoughts and kind of how we pulled these numbers together. And so going into this, one of the questions that was asked is, you can see on the number of events right there at the top, we're projecting to have 101 events this year in comparison to the 100 last year. So a couple of the things that is going to do is impact our gross ticketing revenue, which is that first yellow line right there. And then also the surcharge and the ticketing fees. And several things that we talked through last year is the event mix. You know, what kind of events are we bringing in this year, and what are those deal structures? Because the deal structures are really going to impact where the revenue shows up on this income statement. And so one of the events last year that we had, which was a great one, was Cirque du Soleil. Cirque was still going to be on the same tour this fiscal year. So it didn't make sense for them to revisit our market with the same show. So that one's not going to be in the event mix this year. And so it kind of shifts the numbers that you're seeing. The yellow lines are going to be the gross ticketing revenue, the surcharges, and the ticketing convenience fees. You can see that those have slightly dropped due to this, but the events that they're getting replaced with, we're getting Paw Patrol back in the house. Some of them are more rent based. And so you can see in the purple line in the middle right there, we're recouping some of that revenue through our rental fees. Our rental fees being able to charge back some of the expenses. So the gross ticketing revenue collectively dropped by about $99,000. And then the rent has increased by about 115. So if you guys just remember where the revenue is showing up in these numbers as we kind of go through the next slide as we're looking through the events. And then also one other piece of information to keep in mind as we are looking through the events. On the next slide, you're going to see the net revenue we're projecting for the events. Also in that revenue are the ancillary numbers, meaning concessions and novelties. Those are broken down a little bit further below, and I'll get into those. But just keep that in mind as we go along. And then this next slide, I know you guys are familiar with this. This is the 30,000 foot view of all of the events that we are projecting to come through the arena. And one thing to keep in mind with this slide is that first column is the budgeted column, what we're projecting. That second column, depending on whether or not the event happened, are those numbers right there. So for instance, if you're looking at hockey, that 293 has a P next to it. Since we did not complete the hockey season, we had 3 events left. I put a P right there so you know that those numbers were projected. They weren't the actual numbers since the event did not happen. College hockey right before it, below it is another one. College hockey did happen. So those are the actual numbers. So as we kind of make our way through that, it kind of helps to know what we're comparing against. But hockey will start at the top. We historically have not put any revenue in for hockey postseason play. That has also always been considered icing on the cake for us as far as revenue goes. I think that we were, up until March, we were pretty hopeful that we were going to get to drop some numbers in those buckets this year. But keeping in line with what we've done last year, we're not putting any postseason play in there, but that's certainly not to jinx Riley and the teams, more of a challenge. And then the hockey number, the next one that you're going to see below, is $288,000 that we are projecting to budget versus the 293 that we were projecting this past season. And, we recognize that 288 is slightly lower than where we were projecting, but there were a couple of things that we took into consideration with this. If you guys recall, last year going into the hockey season, they were projecting about 8% growth for the full season equivalents as far as the ticket buyers go, and they did get to that. Right now they're sitting at about 874 as far as FSEs are concerned. And while they did achieve that goal, one of the things that we recognized was coming in to play was really the day of the week that the game fell was impacting the amount of revenue that we were seeing. So if you guys were here for a weekday game versus a Saturday game, since it's a family event, it's a little bit harder for parents to get the kids to hockey games during week games, rightfully so. I don't think I'd really want to mess with a kid the next morning once they've been up since 11 o'clock the night before. But one of the things that we did, and I'm going to flip to another slide real quick. If you look at the top of this slide, one of the things that we did to help refine our budgeted numbers was we took into consideration the amount of revenue being generated during each day of the week to come up with comparative averages. And so that's what you're looking at right there. Fridays, they were generating roughly $7,700 of net revenue. Saturdays were at 10,000. Sundays were at 79. So one of the things that we thought would be very strategic to do was, since we have currently gotten to view next year's schedule, it hasn't been released to the public. They still have the option to make some changes on it. But since we got to view the first draft, we were able to strategically project our revenue based on the number of weekday games versus Friday games. So what you're looking at, that 288 has taken into consideration that we've got right now on the schedule, we've got 5 weekday games, 8 Friday games, and then a total of 23 Saturday and Sunday games. And so while these numbers are slightly less than what where we were projecting to end up, we do feel like this approach is conservative but strategic as far as hockey goes. Hockey is obviously going to still continue to focus on growing their product. There is talks about refocusing their marketing dollars as far as different investment goes. There are some platforms that they had invested in as far as FIVO. FIVO is for group sales. It's an online sales platform that allows for online purchasers to socially share mobile ticketing for individual group buyers and specialty packages. They're also leveraging ECHL data for continued ticket sales. So right now we're budgeting based on what we have seen produced in the past. And while they're going to continue growing, this was really kind of the strategy behind the hockey numbers. And I'll pause right there because I know that's a big one to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Anyone have any questions for Melanie on hockey?
Hey, I'm just going to jump in here. It's not a specific question, but I need to run to the next meeting. Melanie, I did spend a lot of time looking through this, and really well done. I wish that it was based more on normal times and that it isn't
Right.
all subject to things. So that budget had existed here, but I have no further comments. I think we can move on to the next meeting. Thank you all.
Okay, thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Go ahead, Melanie.
All right, so we will go ahead down to the next line item. College hockey for us, I love to call certain events repeat offenders because I think we love having them in the building and they seem to like being here. College hockey is no exception to that. College hockey historically for us has on the booking calendar bounced around to different date plays for different reasons. Partially, a lot of it is dependent upon when UMaine Hockey is traveling themselves and what day they can even come down here and play. And then it's figuring out, well, do we have that date available? So this past year, as you guys remembered, they doubled up with Mariners hockey. They played a noontime game. Mariners played a 7 o'clock game on a Saturday. And then the year before, they were on a Monday night play. And so for us, we've kind of seen them bop around. But this year, we've got them for a Friday night play in November, which is really great. And so that's and right now, the number, the 38,000 you are seeing is compared to an actual this past year. And so I think this is a really great place to have college hockey. And then also to see really what they do on a Friday night. I think we'd always love to have them on a Saturday, but it will be interesting to me to see what the attendance numbers look like on a Friday night, just because parents are still going to be getting off from work and trying to make it down for, a 7 o'clock start or 7:30. It will be interesting to see how many people we have come into the building on a Friday night play, but it's got to be better than a Monday night. So we're hopeful on that one. And then moving down to high school sports, right now you're seeing about an $18,000 increase in that. One of the reasons, if you guys remember this past year, we actually took back one of the days that they were going to be playing because we had booked the Mercy Me concert the Friday night. And so while we generated a lot of revenue with Mercy Me, one of the things that it reduced on the events revenue as far as MPA goes is it was one less day of rental, one less day of having bodies in the building as far as concessions go. So this $92,000 really kind of puts us back in line with where we have been when we have seen those number of days being played in the building. And then as I'm going along, I'll just kind of keep ticking through the events. By all means, if you guys have questions, just kind of get off mute and hit me up with them. Next in the docket is WWE. WWE, as you guys remember last year, they unfortunately had issues with talent scheduling. I think they had a lot of injuries that were stretching them thin. So there were several buildings that had received canceled shows. So I've got them in here this coming year in talks with their routing department. They're looking towards hopefully getting up and running at the beginning of the new year. And so they've got a new girl that's doing routing. I've had conversations with her. We definitely have a WWE market. They definitely have a very strong following. The silver lining here is that they have taken a year off from our market. And so I do think that the WWE fans will be very glad once the ban has lifted and to see some of their favorite athletes performing back in the building. So we've got WWE at $41,000 net revenue. The next two events are Disney on Ice and Sesame Street, some of our family shows that we have with Feld. This past year, we generated about $97,000. That's an actual right there in the second column. First column, we kept it in line with what we were seeing, partially because, as you guys know, the storylines that come through the building with Disney and those shows sometimes change. Frozen that we had a couple of years ago generated $100,000+ in revenue. And so from our understanding, the storyline was really not going to change with the show. And as John Page mentioned, with Disney and Sesame Street, they are down several of the tours. And in talking with the promoters who are running both of these shows, one of the things that I had asked them was, hey, am I going to get a show? And, what he said was, we are working for that to happen. And while I understand you've got to book your building, the agreement that we came to was if anybody were to challenge those dates, meaning I've got another promoter that is wanting to put an event on the dates that are held, I would do the due diligence, let them know, and challenge the date. But I needed to move forwards with the event that was going to produce. And he certainly understood that, but he was very adamant about keeping those dates on hold with our building in the hopes that we were going to continue having both of these events in the building. Next down is ice racing. Ice racing is one of those, I swear that every third weekend in January, we are always going to have snow because that is what has happened the past 2 years with this event. The first year they were in the building, they came close to generating about $20,000 worth of revenue for us. And then the past 2 years, we had the luck of the draw of getting the first seasonal snowstorm on their day, which killed the walk-up. And so I think that $11,000 is really, is us taking a conservative approach with the amount of revenue that this show can generate. I would really like to see what this event can do now, having been in the market for a couple of seasons in no snow. I think that I definitely think, kind of like WWE, there's a niche market for it. I do think that they kind of fall in line with each other as far as the ticket buyer goes, the demographic. But right now we've got them projected at about $11,000. I think they can do better, but for whatever reason, man, the main snow has just been killing that event. Next line down, we have got Paw Patrol. If you guys remember 2 years ago, we had Paw Patrol in the building. During that run, they had about 10 days of tech rehearsals. And that was where I really got to meet one of the contacts, one of the promoters that was working with this show. I got to talk with her also at IEVA this past year, one of our booking conferences. And I just said, hey, like, we really have a market for this show. And it made sense for her to kind of get at the front end of our event season and be in October. And I told her, I said, I'd really like to see one of your products in our building kind of the same time each year. And so right now, October is what we have them booked. And then for next year, she has already started talking about bringing the show Trolls in the building, another kids theatrical show, which I think would do really well. So that's been a great relationship that we have maintained with B-Star. And so looking forward to having Paw Patrol in the building next year. Looking at about $53,000 revenue right there. Next line item down is Marshwood. Marshwood is one of those that they are also a repeat offender for us for the kids with high school wrestling. Their event unfortunately did not happen this year. That's why you see a P right there. But as soon as they realized that they were going to have to reschedule this year, she said, I really want to go ahead and just put ourselves on the booking calendar next year. Hopefully we are beyond the hump with this and we can kind of resume business as normal. This one is not based off of ticket sales. This is based off of net revenues, or excuse me, is based off of a rental agreement. So they pay rent plus expenses for us. So we kept that one a little bit similar. Some of our expenses have gone up a little bit as far as part-time staff goes, EMTs, that sort of thing. So right now we're keeping that one at about $17,000. Next line item we have got is monster trucks. Last year, monster trucks generated about $30,000 for us. It is one of those shows that it has been on a steady decline the past couple of years, but $30,000 has kind of seemed where they have plateaued. One of the reasons why I have this one generating a little bit less revenue this upcoming year, two reasons. The promoter had started asking this year if he could renegotiate the deal that he currently had, meaning that we would split some of the expenses as far as the dirt goes. The dirt costs about $15,000. And so in the off chance, I know that Bangor renegotiated their deal in a similar fashion. So I went ahead and put our revenue in as if we had renegotiated and ended up having to split the dirt expense. I have a couple of thoughts on that. I think that we really need to push to see if we can get the dirt sponsored. They had that a couple of years ago. And I think that's an avenue that definitely needs to be explored here. But if there, there's only so many people that have dirt around here. So in the offset that we do not get that sponsor, this is where the revenues for that event would end up, which is right about $19,000. Next event for us is Globetrotters. Globetrotters, unfortunately, was a COVID casualty for us. They ended up having to reschedule. Right now, they are looking at a November date, and it might end up being a really unique run for them, partially because the only date that they could get back into the building, or that they were going to have a tour routing through this area, was going to be in November, and it was going to fall on the same day that we played a hockey game. And Scanlon had told me that there are a couple of other buildings that have doubled up before, meaning they play Globetrotters around 1 o'clock, get that event out, flip the building, and do a hockey game that night. And so I talked to both Adam and the team, as well as the Globetrotters, and everybody's on board for us to be able to do that. So I know certainly our operations team can crush it. So I think that'll be a unique challenge that we get to do this upcoming year. But Globetrotters, we really kind of kept consistent as far as revenues go, at about $36,000. The next couple line items are always a fun topic of discussion for us as far as the concerts go. I shook things up a little bit in this category. In the past, we've always had concerts broken down into two different categories, majors versus minors. And one of the reasons is it's really kind of dependent on the amount of revenue that each one of them generates. But one of the things that I realized was happening, and you guys know, is anytime we were dealing with a certain promoter, meaning Waterfront and the Live Nation deal, our deal structure was very different than any of the other deals that we were seeing. And so I felt like we were always having this constant conversation of, when those particular deals were in the building, hey man, we're not making budget on these shows, and I didn't really feel like it was a fair comparison. And so one of the things that you will see right here is we will have a major category, a minor category, and then Waterfront will have their own category, just to make sure when we are evaluating the operating budget each year and really kind of looking at them as their own individual category, it's a fair analysis. And so I think this will set us up well this coming year. Also, the number of concerts that we had, we were projected to have 10 by the end of this year. Right now, we have got in there 9. And so some of these events are ones that did not happen in the spring, and they are rebooking for during the new fiscal year. So that to me has been one of the encouraging things, is that even though some of the events have pushed pause due to the pandemic, it wasn't, hey, we're going to throw in the towel. It has very much been the mindset of, when can we get in your building again? What's going to work? So that has been a lot of the dialogues that I have continued to have with all of the promoters, as far as any of the pre-existing events that we had there. Any of them that were on sale have searched for a new date. If they haven't found it, that talk is continuing to happen. And so that's why, I was comfortable keeping 9 of those in there. If you guys remember last year, we had a total of 6. 9 keeps us in the running. I think even if some of them didn't come back, based on certain conversations with other events that are coming into play, I think that 9 is achievable for us. But again, it kind of goes back to the the crystal ball conversation that we were having earlier of, when are the social bans going to be lifted? When is the industry going to get back on track? And most importantly, when are the patrons going to be willing to participate in the events? I do think that we could be looking at a very back-ended loaded event season, similar to where we were this year. So we don't need to have PTSD and say it won't work. I think it's more of the mentality of we can certainly get there. It's just being aggressive in really trying to find dates for people and making sure that they're falling in line with our booking calendar. And right now, the dialogues have consistently been there. So right now, all of the events that we did have, if they have not solidified their date, they have multiple holds on trying to figure out the entire tour. But I'll pause right there. Do you guys have some other?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Are you getting any kind of feel from them that if this goes on and they can't start, what I'm wondering is if we're out of commission for 3 months, which looks like what we are, all in, and that's conservative, is it going to take 6 months to get it re-geared back up? Are the concert promoters and the people you're dealing with, is there feel that if things start to smooth out a bit, that they're going to be is there going to be a pent-up demand?
I think that, based on the conversations that I have had, I feel like we're all kind of at the starting gate, waiting for somebody to press go. And really right now, it's really the government entities that have to lift the bans. But it's really more of the initial conversation is let me rebook. And now that we're kind of in the process of waiting to see when everything kind of kicks back on, meaning really kind of what John and Mike were saying earlier is possibly being a smaller market and getting to kick back online might work to our advantage. But the conversations are 100% still there. There has definitely not been a downscale in any of the conversations that I have had as far as booking goes. It really has kind of continued. The initial conversations were about, man, we've got to postpone or reschedule. And now it's more of, hey, what are your dates constantly looking like? And so I'm constantly sending those emails because it's all continuously so fluid. As things are shifting. But I'm personally encouraged by the amount of conversations that have continued to happen, that people are just kind of waiting for us to get kicked back online. And then they're wanting to start moving. It's just kind of, when is that going to happen?
I was very pleased to hear, and I'm assuming the rest of the trustees are too, that maybe our smaller size for once is played to our advantage, and
right.
in the country too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Acts may say, boy, that's a safe place to go. They can handle us. We know we're not going to get as many. We can't do sold out, but they're safe and we can do it. I hope that's true.
Hey,
Right.
Sam, yeah, I was just going to say, excuse me, Mal, is that, the Live Nation AEGs can't book the major tours because they don't have the LAs, Chicago, New York, New Jerseys, that they can't route it right now. And they don't know what to do. It may be, like you said, the artists just doing fly-in dates where they fly in for a Friday, Saturday show and go home just to get back in. But some of the numbers we got from Ticketmaster are staggering. There's been, to date, because of this, there's been 30,000 shows canceled.
Oh my God.
It equates to 200 million tickets and $15 billion in ticket revenue. And out of those 30,000 shows, 5,000 have only been rescheduled at this point.
Jesus.
So there's 25,000 shows out there that are in a state of flux. They're waiting to see if it's going to cancel, postpone, and when. So, and that's from Ticketmaster. So the industry is in a real state of flux right now. And the flip side could be, you don't want to put, again, too many artists on the road at the same time and too many markets that can't support it. not only from a customer's feeling of comfort to come back and a discretionary spending impact. So,
Yeah.
you know, this happened in 2008 when they got too many artists out there and the economy, you know, we had the recession, and this
Yeah.
led to the $10 Tuesday nights and the 2-for-1s and the, you know, everybody waiting until they discounted tickets at the end.
Yeah.
So we're still trying to recover from that. So the thing is, you talk to Live Nation, they'll tell you today, it's honestly, we don't know.
Yeah.
Ask us in 30 days, but we don't know right now.
Thank you both.
Melanie,
Yep.
if something, the government picks a date, September 1st, October 1st, or whatever that date is, how quickly can you get your full staff up and running? Is that a week, 2 weeks, or take you a month to really be ready to rock and roll? Or?
You know, I think that one of the advantages that we had when everybody started, or when people started initially working remotely, one of the conversations that I had with the staff is, I need you guys to start thinking summer mode, meaning, you know, just because we're slower in the summer doesn't mean we're not busy. I need you guys to go ahead and start cleaning everything, doing your inventory, because at some point this is going to lift. At some point, we're going to be back in the game and we need to be ready. So it certainly would not take us a month to get back up and running. You know, it would depend on the show. What are the needs of the show? You know, our next line item down is PBR. PBR and a comedy show are what we have slated for September. So if we had the comedy show first, I mean, really, it's us setting up the stage and we're really kind of ready to go. You know, it would be Alan making the orders as far as concessions, food and beverage go. So really, I mean, I think 2 weeks is not outlandish. Mike, unless you think I'm talking out of my ear, you know, I think that the way that we ended was abrupt, but we had the mentality of, hey, we got to get ready because it's going to come back online pretty soon. So, you know, for me, if I had to say 2 weeks, I'm not uncomfortable saying that. But it would be, the main focus would be the cleaning of the building, making sure that, you know, although we were already working on that, you know, really making sure we have truly focused on the high touch areas, in making sure that the community is aware of those efforts.
Yeah, to Mike's point, I can see groups like Live Nation and others all of a sudden saying, hey, we've got a release. Let's scramble and get at least some artists out on the road quickly. And the quicker we can recover and say, hey, we're ready for a show, the better we're off we'll be. So, because, you know, with no revenue coming into Live Nation, I'm sure they're hurting like everybody else. And the artists are looking for that revenue too, so.
Yep.
Yep, absolutely. If there aren't any other questions, I'll go to the next line down, which we kind of already touched on. PBR is normally our September play. And, you know, based on the conversations with the promoter there, kind of like Mike said, there's still an influx, but they're still wanting to hold the dates as if they are going to be building. So they and then another comedy show would really kind of be what we would welcome patrons back into the building with in the month of September, and really would be kind of the guinea pigs for the industry to see what you know, to see kind of what patrons are thinking as far as mass gatherings go. Next line item down for us is going to be conventions and trades. Those are going to include Restaurant Association, Home Show, Portland on Tap. Portland on Tap did really well this year. They shook things up and got a new band, which I think attracted probably fans who had come through before and thought, hey, I've been there, done that. New bands and getting some new beers in there for those guys to taste was helped increase that revenue line item right there to $63,000. Religious is the next one. That's the Jehovah's Witness right there. In the projected column, I had 0, partially because the way our deal structure is with them, we have a $10,000 flat rental revenue with them. Most of that goes towards paying labor expenses during that. But our hope is that our union negotiations can kind of help offset some of those expenses with them, and we can see some revenue from that event. Further on down are graduations. The only one that's not going to be present here is Deering graduation. Deering decided to take their graduation over to the Merrill. Of all of the graduations that we did between high schools and colleges, theirs was definitely the smaller one. It kind of made sense for them to be in a smaller venue, in a smaller, more intimate setting. And so while I was, hated to see them go, I think for them that probably made more sense. But everybody else, as far as graduations go, most of them, aside from a couple of the colleges, most of them are still holding on to being able to graduate their kids this year. And having several conversations with the principal, they understood that there was an added layer of us getting turned into an alternate care site. They understood that that was coming into play right now, or the potential of it. But the dialogues that I have had with them are, if you guys are willing to wait and see, I'll keep your original dates on the calendar. Let me know if there's something else that you want to shoot for. Some of them have held dates in late July because they're really hoping that they can give their kids the experience of graduating. And so that's what's going on as far as graduations this year. They haven't all canceled. Their fingers are crossed, hopeful that maybe they can get the kids to walk across the stage. But if not, they're all holding their dates for next year to come back and graduate their kids. Only one of them has discussed about doing a December graduation, which I certainly told them, absolutely, let's look at the dates and figure out if that's a possibility for some of them. And then moving on down, the next couple of line items, I kind of look at together. It kind of depends on what the overall setup of the event is between the banquets, communities, miscellaneous. One that I would consider miscellaneous that has come across my plate is Cirque Holidays Tour. They were looking at hosting a December show. And as of last week, the conversation with them was, they wanted to go ahead and put in an offer, understanding that there was a caveat that depending on what was going to happen with the industry, in that kind of highlights, we're still having conversations about getting online. It's a matter of when we're going to get online. But that kind of takes us through the rest of the events for the year. And then that last line item, Cirque du Soleil, obviously we've removed that one. But the positive to that is, we are holding dates for them for the next 2 fiscal years. Obviously not this one, but the following two. They already know at that point in time, they already knew that they had 2 different tours going out, and they wanted Portland to be on their mark or on their stop with that. So I think that kind of, to be honest about it, really kind of highlights the effort that the staff put in to when they were coming through the building this past time. I'll toot Mike LeConte's horn because their tour IT director said that our building was the best IT experience that he had had his entire tour. So I think that really kind of lets you know the red carpet that we put out for these guys in the fact that they're wanting to hold dates 2 and 3 years out. But that gets us through the summary of events. Does anybody have any questions about that?
It was quite thorough, Melanie. Thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome,
I was going to say
Sandy.
very, very complete, very well done presentation.
Thanks, guys.
All right, moving on, Melanie.
We're getting there. Yep, we're about halfway through. So I'm going to take it back real quick to the income statement and the agenda. If you guys see if we are down to right above the second green box to ancillary revenues, the concessions and the merch number for us. So these numbers were included in the event revenue that you just saw. But if you look in the third column right here, a lot of times I like to look at the variance. So for concessions, we're showing that we have increased by about $42,000. And then merch has gone down by about $9,000. So I'm going to flip on another slide real quick. If you guys will look at the bottom of this PowerPoint slide, this is just a snapshot of an overall Excel spreadsheet that we have going on. But it really kind of gives us the historical information of each event. We've taken it back 3 and 4 years, and it allows us to look at the overall ebb and flow of what the per caps were doing. And it really kind of gives us the opportunity to talk about why some of our numbers have fluxed the way that they have, specifically pertaining to F&B. And so it allows us to have the conversation with Alan to really say, why did numbers decrease or why did they increase? What can we do better on? What do we need to tweak? So again, this is one of my favorite spreadsheets because it actually is kind of fun to listen to Alan talk. I call him a mad scientist in the back of the building. But we really get to kind of make adjustments with the events as they're coming through. And Kane Brown is one that we, at the beginning of March, we really kind of took some liberties with in making adjustments just, to see what was going to happen. We altered the points of sale on the concourse. If you guys remember the layout of the building, the Free Street side of the building has all of those glass doors. Normally that is not an entry point for patrons. So for Kane Brown, what we did is we made that an entry point. We rented metal detectors, or we borrowed them from Aura. So we set up another entry point onto the concourse, because what happens is when people go into the building, the first things that they see as far as bars and restrooms are really what they naturally gravitate back towards. And when you're not entering on one side of the building, that's one side of the building as far as concessions go that really doesn't get a lot of love. And so what we did by opening up that side of the building, Alan got to set up a ton of bars in that area to really expedite the amount of time people were getting into the building so they could immediately start hitting up the bars, hitting up the concession stands, and it alleviated lines on the other side of the building. So that was one of the things that we did and we tried out that worked really well. Specialty drinks for that event was also something we've always historically done, but having worked with Waterfront, Alex was willing to pull some of their novelty drinks from Westbrook. There were plastic guitars that had a lanyard around them that you could fill up with a pretty mixed drink, and have that be something that was sold. That we did that there. And then the additional thing for Kane Brown that we did was we, 2 hours before doors, we had several security staff on the clock that went ahead and started checking IDs and wristbands in all of the lines. So before the person even entered into the building, they already had their alcohol wristband. So as soon as they got through the lines, they could immediately go to the concession stands, and there wasn't that lag at the bars of having to check the ID, to issue the wristband there. It was already taken care of. Now, certainly if the bartender felt the need to redo the process, they could, but there were definitely some things that we found fruitful in that show that we're going to replicate later on. In Kane Brown for us, the scanned attendance for that was 5,300 people, but the per cap for that was $19. And so that's something that we really have not seen with our past events. So that's really why when we combine the historical knowledge and then knowing that, hey, we're going to keep tweaking, just kind of be fluid with whatever event that we've got coming in the building as far as setup goes, IDing wristbands, we really do think that that's how we can achieve that $40,000 increased revenue there.
Melanie, I need to tell Tom, I have to leave for food pantry, so I'll be checking out.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Holly.
Got it. So next line item that we've got on the list is going to be be novelty. So I know that I'm showing a $9,000 decrease on that. One of the things that was great about this event season was that we had some unique events coming through that were really weighted heavily as far as merch sale goes. Mercy Me was one of those, but additionally, JoJo Siwa is one of those. She is geared towards the tween market. And so while we would not show a high per cap, as far as F&B goes on JoJo, it would be weighted more heavily towards merch. To give you guys an example, for Globetrotters, as far as merch per caps goes, would be right around $2 or $3. And that, you know, we would consider that a good novelty per cap for them. JoJo Siwa will do about $16 to $18 as far as merch goes. So when those shows come in the building, it's always really great for merch. But knowing that those are kind of the outliers in the event mix that we generally see, that's why you're seeing a reduction there as far as merch goes. And then that gets us to the second green box, the event operating income of 1.3 million. Do you guys have any questions up until that point?
No questions. It would be nice if we hit those targets.
Yeah. We will keep moving right along. Let me get you guys on another slide. Top of this, so right now we have got, if you guys remember, ancillary or sponsorship revenue for us is going to be, each year it's broken down into the category of, we looked at contract renewals, contract losses, and contract gains. And we really like to look at the ebb and flow of what's happened. Looking at the right side of the screen right there, Zach is showing $302,000 of renewals coming in, which is about 7% increase from last year's amount. Contract losses well, let me back up. Some of the new business that they've got, Bath Iron Works is a new one. Aroma Joe's, if you guys remember going into the hockey season last year, we did an open skate to the public for Aroma Joe's. Martins Point Healthcare, Hannaford, Central Maine Power, and None Such Brewings is some of his new businesses. Zach has kind of really hit the ground running hard this past year as far as new business goes. And then the next line item down is contract losses. The contract losses were due to trade agreements that we had reflected on the book that were no longer being utilized, or we had intentions to switch partners. So that revenue was really not because Zach wasn't doing his job or the sponsor wasn't pleased, us having to show the trade on the expense. We took this past year to really kind of monitor what trade was being utilized and what was not. So what we had removed was trade that just really wasn't being utilized, and as far as an expense goes, didn't make sense to keep carrying it on. And then as far as naming rights go, I'll flip back that page. Naming rights is going to be in year 7 of a 10-year contract. And so I know over the next year and a half, Zach's really going to start really kind of dialing in the conversations with Cross about continuing the partnership that we have had with them. There really have been no indicators at this point that it won't get renewed. I mean, the only other outlying factor that could possibly come into play would obviously be the pandemic. But again, that goes back to the crystal ball effect. What does the crystal ball tell us? But right now, all the indicators are showing that we'll keep having a great partnership with these guys. Next line item down, you've got suites. Right now, we're projecting for the 6 suites to be sold for the upcoming year. If you guys remember last year, we had the conversation about On Target selling their company to a foreign competitor. All of the traditional advertising assets included in that founding partnership were sold at higher rates in the form of fixed signage, commercial spots, and digital inventory. So if you guys kind of think about, from for lack of better terminology, selling a car for parts. That's in theory what we did. We broke up that sponsorship, sold it off. He also got to combine certain assets with other partnership packages to really kind of be able to recoup that revenue. The only part of that that he did not sell was the annual contract of the suite. However, what he did do was sell it on an event by event basis. So he was able to recoup all of the revenue that would have been in a sponsorship package. He was able to recoup it through the individual event rentals. So that's really what was going on with that. So it's definitely a space that is still getting utilized. It just looks a little bit different than it being wrapped up in a sponsorship package. Next on the list is going to be PSLs. PSLs, we had an increase there. BIW, so Bath Iron Works and Aroma Joe's, also worked on those. If you guys remember, there's about 326 of these to sell. About 70% of those will usually get sold to sponsorships, 25% to commercial business, and then 5% residents. So that's why you're seeing on that line item some increase there. And then right below that is going to be our other rentals income. That's going to be the hockey program, and then also Ticketmaster revenue. Right there, there's a slight decrease by about $4,000. One of the things that we saw this past year with high school hockey rentals, having a new superintendent who obviously was going to dictate when the schools could travel when inclement weather was happening, took a bit more conservative approach about keeping the kids at home when bad weather was happening. And so we saw the decline consistently happen there in that rentals revenue category. So we took a conservative approach there and reined that in a little bit. But that gets us through our other income category. Any questions there?
Melanie, I just have one question. Again, back on advertising sponsors, I'm assuming Zach is taking into consideration in looking at those numbers, again, the changed world that we're all facing, including relationships with sponsors. I mean, he's comfortable with these numbers given the new world we're dealing in?
Yeah, so these numbers are really heavily driven by the contracts that are already in place, or the ones that are based on conversations where he's comfortable saying, hey, there isn't a signed contract, but we do feel certain, given the state of the state, that these contracts will come through. So this number right here is showing the revenue that we already have confirmed. But yes, I think given what you're saying, I think Zach will have interesting conversations in the future as far as retaining new business goes.
Thank you.
Yep. And then if there aren't any more questions in that one, I will take you to the last slide at the bottom of the page as a breakdown for our indirect expenses. There is $129,000 increase in our indirects, which is broken down right here. Proposed wage adjustments for the staff to stay consistent with what we did last year. There is a 2.5% cost of living increase, which Jim, Alex, and I have had the discussion of whether or not that is going to happen. Obviously based on what's happening. So it's with the understanding that this could certainly get pulled from the operating budget, but for conversation's sake, we left that piece in there. Incentive compensation projection, it's budgeted for 100% achievement, whereas last year we only received 30% of that. So this is us putting that money back in the pot in the hopes that it could be achieved, but obviously with the fluidity of everything, I think that would be a very high goal to attain. Projected benefit costs of $39,000. That's a 5% projected increase as of January 1st, 2021. And then a couple of other increases that you would see primarily in the operating budget would be due to Cleaning supplies and taking into consideration needing to have more staff on, even on off days to clean the building. So collectively, that's right at about $10,000 right there that we went ahead and put in, knowing that we would probably be spending more money on cleaning supplies, having another staffer in the building, cleaning the building based on what's going on in the current economy. What was that? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Are you making plans, or if you've not already, I see this in some of the bigger buildings already where they're putting big institutional size wipes and Purell type drums and things like that. Are you having plans on putting those around the center?
So we haven't talked about putting those buckets around, but right now we've got the hand sanitizer pieces that are going around. And before everything kind of we had already we didn't have the buckets up on the walls, but we did have the wipes on the platforms where the attendants stand, so we can hand those to patrons if they're requesting to wipe their seats down. But part of this increase in the expense is to cover things of that nature if we do decide to move in that direction. Certainly there's a ton of different ways we can go about, allowing a patron to clean their area. But that's what this is really kind of taking into consideration as far as allowing the customers to take part in the cleaning piece.
Cool. Good. Thank you.
Melanie, I know one thing that I've seen actually on TV a couple of times is a lot of companies are using these portable foggers, a handheld. They use them in doctor's offices a lot. Maybe, just before an event, if the public was notified that all the seats have been sprayed, fogged, or whatever, that might alleviate some fears. I don't know what kind of expense that gets involved, but.
Tom, let me tell you, we think alike, because one of the things that we have gotten to utilize is corporate's resources as far as operations go. And that was one of the things that there was an email sent out a couple of weeks ago about our relationship with Home Depot. And there was a Clorox machine that would basically do exactly what you're talking about. That the cost of it was about $4,000. And so while the price tag on that kind of scared me, I initially thought, oh man, maybe I can share that machine with the jail, or there are other county departments that we could all benefit from having that kind of machine. And so Jim went ahead and approved the purchase of that. It's a 12-week turnaround time for getting that sprayer into the building. So I've already gone ahead with moving forward with purchasing it. It's just a matter of waiting on it to get here. But great minds think alike on that one. I don't think I've ever been so excited to get a Clorox sprayer in my life as I have. Yeah, that's where we are with that. And then last note isn't a good one to end on, showing some savings in our utilities. The past year is about $20,000 worth. So part of that had to do with LED lighting. That was a good little savings there to get us to our bottom line of $129,000 that we were seeing in the increase.
Now, will the new chiller run more efficiently?
It better. No, yes, I'm just kidding. And that's one of the bonuses of having that in the building. One of the things that happened with that, Jim was kind and saying that we had learned how to massage that thing to work, but there were times when it would kick off during a hockey game. And so, yes, it'll run more efficiently, and more importantly, it'll be more reliable as far as doing what it needs to for us.
Anybody have any further questions for Melanie?
No, not I.
Is Jim still there?
Of course I'm still here.
I was just going to say, there's a lot of things out there in the industry that are being talked about, and it really depends on what's going to be mandated or allowed. There's companies working on retrofitting the walk-through metal detectors with thermometer gauges, whereas a patron walks through, it'll automatically take their temperature. If that's something that's mandated, if it's not mandated, we wouldn't advise based on HIPAA regulations and potential lawsuits. But there's a lot of stuff going on in the industry as we talk to our different vendors and that we're just getting prepared just in case.
Jim, question, is this a document that we need to vote on today, or is this something that needs to be done next month?
I think the best approach, Tom, would be to thank Melanie for her very thorough presentation, but kick this can down the road and maybe we meet at the end of May and allow the next 45 days to play out and see what happens. We can adjust and dodge and duck based on what we know over the last 45 days or the next 45 days.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking too, and give us all a chance to digest it some more. Melanie, that was an excellent presentation, and it's very easy to read going through it this time. In past years, I've had some struggles, but this is very clean, very easy to do. So you did a great job, and I appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
Jim, if we wait till May, that still fits into your schedule with the county budget?
Yes, my goal is hopefully the commissioners will be meeting the second Monday of June. So if we can put a bow on this with a recommendation prior to that meeting, I can get it on that commissioners meeting. That's my timeline in my head right now.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds like a plan. Does anybody else have any questions for today?
One thing, Tom, I'd like to do is just spend 30 seconds going over the trustees budget, as minimal as it is. Travis, if you could shoot that up on the screen. So as you can see, this is a budget that kind of takes care of some accessory uses or costs associated with the cross insurance arena, and it's more in the costs surrounding the trustees. If you go back 2 or 3, 4 years, you can see that there was some significant dollars earmarked. But over the years and the transitioning of the trustees and the county partnership, we've been able to see some cost reductions. This year, I'm proposing a budget of $174,000. What does that make up? That makes up a $15,000 line item in professional services. That's down from $18,000, and more importantly, down from $25,000 just a few years ago. We're holding the line at $1,200 for our board meetings. That takes care of food, parking, things like that. Then we go down to management incentive fees. I plugged in $80,000. That is going to be something that we need to work through. That number might be high, but we need to, Melanie and I need to talk about that in the coming months to see how this year ends up in the different categories that make up the incentive fee. Then the largest portion of this budget is the insurances. Insurances are covered by the trustees, and so I've estimated a slight increase in the package and the auto. Good. So we're looking at $174,400, down from $183,200 in the current year. And really, I'm pretty certain on most of the fees, with the exception of or most of the budget line items, other than the incentive fee. That's something that we'll plug that in for discussion purposes, but that will be fine-tuned in the coming months.
Jim, what's in the professional services line? Is that legal services?
That could be legal. As you probably are aware, over the last 2-3 years, we really haven't had an attorney present during our discussions. Today, we had our first presence of an attorney so that we could go into executive session. So that's where that money would come out of to pay her.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Again, we'll act on this as part of any recommendation in May?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I want to thank you all for the patience we've had this morning. It's been a long morning and a long meeting, but we had a lot of ground to cover.
Tom, I have one more quick question for Melanie.
Yes, go ahead.
There is a show where that's supposed to be scheduled for May. What's the status on that? I know it's been canceled, but has that been rescheduled?
You might, Melanie.
You're muted, Melanie.
No, she's not. I can hear her.
I can't hear her. I can hear you. I can see you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Melanie
can't
shows
hear her.
muted to me.
Yeah, Melanie's muted, I think. Yes, she
Yeah.
is.
Well, maybe she talked too much during her budget presentation. And
She's trying to undo it. Come on, Melanie. You can do it.
Send her a text, Jim.
What about now? What
There you
about
are.
Yeah.
I had been
I'm
trying
back.
to pick
Sorry
up
about that,
the
folks.
presentation. Yes, they are working on a new date for that. All of the shows, and when I say all of the shows, there were 5 concerts. There were comedy shows in there. JoJo Siwa was in there. All of those are currently holding new dates, and they're just not ready to go back online yet. To answer that question. So yes, there are new dates right now for all of those shows.
So if the new date doesn't coincide with a person's schedule, would there be the refund?
Depending on, right, that's a really great question. Depending on what promoter it is, it will determine their ticketing philosophy behind refunds. There is, you and I can talk offline about which show which one you're thinking about. But certain promoters are coming up with different ways to handle this. One conversation that I had earlier in the week, and I think I know which show you're asking about, said that once we go back online with the new date, we will give patrons 30 days to get a ticketing refund if the new date does not work for them.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I've had some questions on that. Yep.
Tom, I have a question for Melanie.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't ask it during the time, but I didn't hear you say anything about high school basketball tournament. That's a no-show?
No, that was probably the 3rd line item down. Those guys at this point, they are still holding dates for February next year. So right now I have not had any conversations that would indicate otherwise.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And I might have missed this, Melanie, on the shows that were postponed or canceled. Have we experienced a lot of refunds that we've actually had to return to ticket purchasers?
Most of our refunds right now have been between Mariners hockey. The Mariners hockey, they took the ticketing stance of for the season ticket holders, they could apply a credit next year, or for the individual ticket buyers who had bought ahead of time, would issue them refunds. So we have been seeing some refunds come across the plate as far as hockey goes. Gabriel Iglesias is another one. We have issued refunds for, partially because they have already gotten their new date, announced it, and already announced to the patrons for that particular show what their ticketing policy was, that if they did want to get a refund that they could. So refunds have been happening, yes.
Okay, but not to a great extent.
Not right now, but then again, all of our shows that got rescheduled have not come back online. So it will be interesting to kind of see what percentages we see as far as refunds go, or, if people do hang on to their tickets.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Anything else this morning?
Tom, can I bring up one thing?
Certainly.
Just in looking over on items 2 and 3, the financial and the event, we need a motion to approve those and a second.
I move approval of the February and March financials.
Second.
Okay, thank you. And I'll do the roll call. Thomas Tyler,
Yes.
Jonathan Crimmins,
Yes.
Joe Gray,
Yes.
John Jameson,
Yes.
Sam Surprise,
Yes.
Stephen Webster.
Stephen, he's got his sound off.
Okay,
We can't hear you.
Thumbs up.
that's okay.
There.
Okay, I had my headphones in. You can hear me. I'm a yes.
Thank you very much.
Glad to see
Barbara, you all set?
I'm all set. I appreciate it.
You all set, Jim?
I'm all set. Thank you all for your time. We had a pretty lengthy meeting today, and I appreciate you guys all sticking on board with us.
Okay,
Yes, thank you all. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
So move. Stay safe, everybody.
Be healthy.
Stay
Everyone,
stay
be safe.
6 feet